Hey guys, my name is Nick. I'm a Microsoft Certified Expert Administrator. I create a lot of content for MSPs, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about Intune hybrid deployment for device management. So as far as the agenda for today, we're going to be doing a high-level overview of the current landscape, some shifts in the industry that have brought up new security concerns, and also other concerns we may have when looking to full cloud device management, which is looking at capital expenditures and some of the existing infrastructure that we have in place today. Then I'll be going over some of the recommended actions I have for you as well for Intune hybrid deployment, and then some common considerations like printers, file shares, considerations with RMM tools, things like that. So when we look at today's current landscape, digital transformation has changed the way people work and the ways that companies do business. We've shifted to an employee mindset of wanting to work from anywhere at any time on any device, and this has brought up a lot of new security concerns. We used to have our trusted perimeter network where users could go and access data, but now they're accessing it on BYOD devices, personal laptops, so we've moved into this zero trust network. We need to grant access to resources based off of user health and device health rather than being on our trusted perimeter network. In addition to that, we have some capital expenditure considerations where we're primarily looking at our Active Directory domain controller that we have some lasting cost in, as well as the existing infrastructure from the standpoint of group policies, printers, different settings that we've configured for devices from a security perspective, and things like that. So an introduction to Intune here, if you guys are not familiar, it's both a MDM and a MAM solution, so mobile device management, mobile application management. From the standpoint of mobile device management, when you enroll devices into Intune, you can centrally push down policies, applications, profiles, PowerShell scripts, things like that to traditionally mimic the group policies we've been pushing down to our devices in an Active Directory environment. We have the ability to remotely wipe these devices at any time. And from the mobile application management perspective, it separates out corporate versus personal data on a particular device. The cool part is we don't actually have to have that device enrolled into our MDM solution in order to control the data that's on the applications themselves. So we can define what our managed applications will be in the sense of the corporate data being on them, and we can encrypt that data and we can remotely wipe that data if it's lost or stolen or if the employee leaves. This, in my opinion, is one of the more powerful parts of the solution itself, just because of the security concerns that we have today, in addition to compliance regulations that we have to meet as well too. So conditional access is the other part that I wanted to bring up today as well too. So we've touched on, we want to give access to resources based off of user health and device health. Conditional access on a whole defines certain conditions that are met to enforce certain controls. So when I look at this, a common example would be if a user is not on my network, I want to prompt them for multi-factor when they are trying to access corporate resources. Something like that. It can get really granular as you see here. It becomes more powerful when you involve the Intune solution as well too, because you can grant access based off of device health. So with Intune, you're defining device compliance policies that say this is a compliant device, such as password requirements, BitLocker encryption being on the device, AV being on the device, things of that nature. And if it becomes in an unhealthy state and it detects malware, then you can prevent access to corporate resources. The same could be true when you're preventing access based off of the device not being enrolled in the MDM solution as well. So some of the recommended actions we'll be walking through today is one, we're going to run the MAT tool. I'm going to go over what that exactly is. We're going to configure Windows Autopilot for hybrid join of our devices so they can push down to our local Active Directory and also join into Azure AD. We're going to incorporate enrolling devices into Intune as part of our change management checklist. And then we're going to sell our customer on the MAM and mobile solution that Intune does provide. So getting into it here, the MAT tool or MDM Migration Analysis tool is something that you can run on your Active Directory or domain controller environment, and it's going to do assessment on all your group policies and assess compatibility with what is available within Intune from an MDM standpoint as well, and show you what exactly the setting is that you would need to turn on to mimic that particular GPO. In addition, you have the ability to see what's not supported from an MDM standpoint at this time, so you can collectively look at that and see if it's something pertinent to your environment as well too. Highly advise in any hybrid solution, or if you've had an Active Directory environment, running this tool. It's free. I have a whole video showing you how to do that I'll link in this video as well, that you can use to better assess moving to the cloud. Next, we have the Windows Autopilot solution, and looking at the traditional Windows deployment methods, we've traditionally built custom images, we've updated driver information, we've pushed out applications to our devices, we've pushed out these settings with group policy. All of it has been pretty time consuming and expensive to make any changes for our internal staff. With modern deployment with Windows Autopilot, Microsoft is simplifying this solution, and we moved into Windows as a service with Windows 10 for the update cycle. Windows Autopilot is something where Microsoft is now using this as their basis for the entire device lifecycle. So when we think about this in the general sense here, we're ordering from an OEM provider like Dell, Lenovo, HP, things like that, and we are going ahead and grabbing hardware IDs, which we're uploading into this Autopilot service. When we do, the Windows Autopilot service is directly connected with our Intune environment, and we can sync the device over to Intune at that point in time. So at the purchase of new hardware, you can sync the device over to Intune. You can also set up what is called an Autopilot profile, which defines the out-of-box experience for the end user. So some of the similar settings that they might see when they boot up the device, like the Microsoft EULA and things like that. From there, you as the IT administrator would go in and configure policies, profiles, applications that you want to push down to that device as well too. When a user gets their device, they can actually have it shipped directly to their site without you having to be involved, because you've set this up centrally in a remote place in the Intune Endpoint Manager Admin Center. When the user turns the device on, the Windows Autopilot service is activated as long as they have an internet connection, and will self-deploy all of the policies, all of the applications like your RMM tool, for instance, your Office suite, all down to that device as well too. So a user can really go straight from box to production in a matter of minutes, and it's minimizing IT intervention. In addition, you have the ability for Windows Autopilot reset, which will wipe the device back to a factory-ready state, and you can assign it to a new user when you hand it over. So you really don't ever have to touch the device when you're looking at change management and also user onboarding. So second to that is also the hybrid deployment, which I encourage for most of you here who still have CapEx in on-prem Active Directory environments. So very similar to what we just saw there as far as garnering the hardware IDs, uploading them into the Autopilot service, getting the devices synced within Intune. The only difference from this perspective is you're setting up an Intune connector with your on-prem Active Directory environment, so that when you are adding these devices and when they are booted up, they are getting legacy GPOs, and the device itself is being pushed down into an OU that you designate from the Intune connector that you're setting up. So these group policies that you've had in place for a while are then pushed over as well too, and you can apply legacy GPOs to a device, but also start to have it enrolled into the Intune solution as well too, and just maximize efficiencies across the company. When you're looking at a comparison of GPOs versus Intune policies, any overlap that may exist or any conflicts, GPOs still take precedence at this time. So the other part that we need to look at is existing devices. So we talked about new devices here, but when we think about enrolling existing devices into Intune, there's a couple of different methods that you can use. One of which is going onto the device itself, going to the settings, add a worker school account, and joining the device that way with the user's credentials. Most cases though, it's going to be kind of problematic because they don't have local admin privileges, and you need to do that on their behalf in a lot of cases. And if you think about the time-consuming process that might be if you're looking at a holistic deployment, it doesn't really make sense to do one device at a time. The other method is gathering the hardware ID from the PowerShell script that you can run. And again, I'll link my video that I made on this below as well too, so you know how to do this. But you can gather this script to output the serial ID and upload the device into the Autopilot service. What I recommend doing is using this as part of your change management process that you have today, because most likely you're already touching the device itself, and it's a good time to add this as part of that checklist. So you can upload it into Autopilot, which subsequently enrolls it into Intune as well too. So the next time that device is going to be changed, you can use the Autopilot reset and then push down all of your applications and policies from the Intune perspective. And if you're using an RMM tool like Automate or something like that, you could potentially just run the script off of your tool and collect the hardware IDs in a central repository and upload them all. So it's a more automated way to do that. Lastly here, when you think about the solution of Intune itself, if you're not already selling it today, it can come standalone, $6 a user per month, but most likely you're going to want to maximize the security and compliance value out of it. So you're looking at a solution like M365 Business that's available with Microsoft today. A lot of customers in SMB are on the Office 365 Business Premium SKU, which is $12.50 a month. And you're looking at moving that customer from a $12.50 a month solution to a $20 a month solution. So what I recommend is selling them on the security and compliance perspective. When you think about Intune, we like to look at a lot of the features that mimic our existing group policy environments, but not a lot of people focus on the mobile application side of things and the mobile management for Android and iOS devices. So that's where I would really sell that as far as a security and compliance solution. With MAM, you can create application policies that you can push out that say, hey, these are my managed devices, or managed applications, I should say. And if you're trying to access my corporate data on a non-managed application, I'm going to redirect you. And you can see that in the right-hand side here. This is an Android device where the user is trying to access their email on the native mail client on the device itself, and they're being redirected to the Google Play Store to download Outlook app and use it there. So you can centrally encrypt the corporate data, and you can wipe that device if it's lost or stolen, or if the employee leaves. Secondly, with the MDM, we can enroll iOS and the Android devices as well into that solution and get them into a compliant state. If the customer is falling under certain compliance regulations like HIPAA or FINRA, they're most likely going to need to have these devices enrolled from a management perspective. So some common considerations that we have as well too. Get the question all the time, can Intune replace my RMM tool based off of what it can do today? So I want to bring up some considerations around that as well. So when we think about Windows 10 as a service now, we're moving into these managed update cycles or upgrade cycles every 2 years instead of looking at the traditional model of major upgrades every 3 years. And when we're looking at doing that, Intune has what they call Windows 10 deployment rings, which is really just patch management within Intune. So the settings you see here in the picture are probably something you're very familiar with in your RMM tool that you've been using for patch updates. But you can define the servicing channel, you can define how long it can be deferred, and then the user experience of when you're actually going to auto install. And you want to make that as least disruptive as possible. But with these, you can assign different update rings to different users and things like that to control how patch updates are being performed. Microsoft has their 2 major service updates per year, and then they do their monthly quality updates where they're doing the feature and security updates as well. And you can centrally define who's getting what cycle of that as well too. From the remoting capability standpoint, it's really non-existent in my opinion. They have a direct integration with TeamViewer that you can use to remote into the devices, but if you're looking to provide a heightened support solution and remote into these devices to remediate why something came out of compliance, or a user reported something that you need to remote onto the computer for, it's not going to be a solution for that. Lastly there, device enrollment. We went over some of the methods of enrolling these devices into the Intune solution. A lot of cases it doesn't make sense to do them all at once just because of how time consuming it is. There's no agent that you can centrally push out through your Active Directory environment on-prem or anything like that. So it's really taking my recommendations as far as incorporating into your change management cycle and then configuring hybrid join for your new devices that you order for the customer. Printers are also the other common consideration when you're mapping printers and print servers are in place with the CapEx involved. So there's a couple different solutions you have. You can configure hybrid cloud print within the M365 solution, and this allows Azure AD joined devices to discover on-premise printers as well. It's pretty complex actually to set up. Secondly, you can define PowerShell scripts within Intune that you can push out to devices. This can include the printer information, driver information that you would need to configure that on the local devices themselves. This would obviously be different for each type of printer manufacturer that you're using or customers are using in their environments. And then there's the consideration of eventually you're going to have to move off of print servers and move into a cloud print solution where you're moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. And there's a lot of different solutions out there. There's a couple that I wanted to showcase just simply because they integrate directly with Intune in Microsoft 365 and Azure AD. So this is Printix, and this is something where you could buy a per seat cost for being able to manage print infrastructure in the cloud and map those printers to devices as well. So this is something that you could look at doing, and I would look at your pricing as far as what you're spending today in your CapEx versus what you'd be paying on a monthly basis for an end user. Lastly, they're coming soon. This was just announced 3 days ago. Universal Print from Microsoft. So this is something where they are providing a solution in Azure that will eliminate the need for print servers. So it's cloud-based print infrastructure, and you can set this up and you can register printers with Active Directory, control printer properties and configuration from one central location, and manage access to the printers based off of user groups. So this is something that's pretty cool in my opinion that's coming, and this might actually be the go-to solution if you're thinking about the printer considerations that you might have. Lastly here, file shares, typical in a lot of different customer environments. So a couple different solutions. OneDrive, known folder move KFM, is really the solution now for mapping user profiles and all their information up into the cloud. It allows you to save local storage on the device by making the documents and files on a user's workstation saved centrally just in the cloud, and you can download them on demand if you really wanted to. This also allows you to sync up all the information so that if they do get a new computer, it would just push out OneDrive and it would update with all their files and folders immediately on the new device itself. And a lot of people are using the known folder move and the syncing abilities of OneDrive and SharePoint to map the shared files and folders that they use across their organization. So this is moving off of a network share in a general sense and moving to this type of solution. They offer the SharePoint migration tool, which is that SPMT that I reference here, which allows you to migrate your file share into SharePoint document libraries. The biggest thing that I can give as far as pieces of advice for that though is really to clean up the file share before you move it into SharePoint. There's a common misconception of people trying to just map their entire file share into one document library in SharePoint, and that's really not how it was designed to work. And it wasn't designed to work with a bunch of nested folders as well either. It was meant based off of teamwork and looking at different departments that share certain types of data and having a different document library repository for each of those departments and defining permissions around that. So this is a bigger move, in my opinion, from the standpoint of having to scope out the existing file share and centrally map it to a SharePoint solution, which is different in the way people will access it. But they do provide that tool from a migration standpoint, and that is free as well too. So for next steps here, what I recommend, first and foremost, if you're not selling Intune today as part of a solution, and you're looking to upgrade them from a traditional SKU like Office 365 Business Premium to M365 Business, look at the security and compliance solution with the mobile application management policies you can push out from data perspective, and then also enrolling those mobile devices like iOS and Android into the management solution so you can begin to control access to data and being able to remotely wipe these devices as well too. Secondly, I would run the MAT tool in your domain controller just to assess the common GPOs that you have with Intune and understand, get a better idea of what policies you would need to set up and what that migration process would look like. Then I would recommend incorporating the Intune enrollment into your change management checklist. So whenever you have user turnover, you're touching those devices, grab those hardware IDs and upload them into the Autopilot service. Configure a hybrid device join with Windows Autopilot. So you want to configure the architecture and make sure you're pushing down those devices, both to Azure AD and to the OU in your Active Directory environment that you have CapEx for. And lastly create apps and policies in Endpoint Manager portal for devices enrolled into Intune. Define what it means to be in a healthy state for a device, so you can combine that with conditional access to provide access only to users in devices that are in a healthy state. All of these I have videos for that I'll link below as far as the actual implementation of each one of these that you can actually see firsthand. But if you do have any questions or comments on anything that I covered today, feel free to leave them below. Thanks. Have a good one.